Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me today for our second last tax education presentation for the year. Today's presentation is going to be focused on ITINs. So we're going to discuss what they are, who should have one, and why it's important to have an ITIN. Once again, my name is Zahra, and I am the staff attorney working in the Low-Income Taxpayer Clinic with the Erie County Bar Association Volunteer Lawyers Project. Just a brief disclaimer, the information in this presentation is intended for educational purposes only, and it does not constitute legal advice. So, quick overview of the items that we're going to discuss. We're going to go back to elementary school and to go who, what, when, where, and why. So we're going to begin by discussing what an ITIN is, who needs an ITIN and why it's important, how to apply for an ITIN and where you can apply. We will also briefly discuss ITIN expiration and what you should do if you become eligible for a Social Security number and you do receive it. So to begin, ITIN stands for an Individual Taxpayer Identification Number. And essentially, it's a tax processing number which is issued by the IRS. It is limited to individuals who do not have a Social Security number, and are not eligible to receive a Social Security number from the Social Security Administration. So in essence, really, the primary objective is to provide a means or a tool for individuals to comply with U.S. tax laws regardless of their immigration status. So I understand that tax and being compliant with U.S. tax laws is not usually the forefront concern of many individuals. But as we will discuss a little bit later in the presentation, we can see how it has very important repercussions when it comes to your immigration status and otherwise. So who needs an ITIN? Really, there are three primary groups. So an individual who is required to file a tax return, but who does not meet the requirements to be issued a Social Security number. So even if you are not lawfully working in the U.S., any income that you receive is still taxable. So it is important to be in compliance. And again, we'll discuss in further detail why that's important. But just be aware, just because you are not just because you might not have lawful status to work in the U.S., that doesn't mean that the income that you receive in the U.S. is not taxable. Secondly, spouses, dependents, and any other individual who is required to furnish a taxpayer identification number, but who is not eligible to obtain a Social Security number. So if you're married or the dependent of a U.S. citizen or U.S. resident, in order for them to claim you on their tax returns, you do have to have a taxpayer identification number. For many individuals, that would be a Social Security number. If you're not eligible to receive one, you can apply for an ITIN. And then finally, a non-resident alien who wishes to claim a tax treaty benefit. I want to take a moment to just clarify a few items that an ITIN does not do. So most importantly is an ITIN does not entitle you to any Social Security benefits, and it does not change your immigration status. It's also very important to note that it does not change your right to work in the U.S. So again, although it will help you obtain filing compliance, collection compliance, it does not affect your right to work in the U.S. in any way or your immigration status. Secondly, an ITIN cannot be used to claim certain federal tax credits. So this includes the earned income tax credit. If you have an ITIN but not a Social Security number, unfortunately, you would not be eligible to claim the earned income tax credit. Similarly, if you have a child who has an ITIN but not a Social Security number, they would not be eligible. They would not be considered a qualifying child, for the child tax credit. So how do you apply for an ITIN? There's three primary steps. The first is you have to fill out the form W-7, and I do want to just show you a quick. I just want to quickly go through what the W-7 looks like. So this is the form W-7, the application for IRS Individual Taxpayer Identification Number. It is not a lengthy form by any means. The first section really going to be checking your reason for submitting a W-7, so that is we discussed. If you are trying to claim a tax treaty benefit, if you're a non-resident alien filing a U.S. federal tax return, or you are a U.S. resident alien based on the substantial presence test, so you're required to file a tax return under certain circumstances, or if you're the dependent or a spouse of a U.S. citizen or resident alien. And then fill out your information here. If you are a non-resident alien, you would have to include a foreign address. But again, it's not a lengthy form. Just want to do a visual to see what it looks like. Sorry. Going back to presentation. So the second step, once you filled out your Form W-7, you want to gather your supporting documentation. Really, the documentation is used to primarily to verify your identity and also verify your foreign status. If you are applying for an ITIN as a spouse or a dependent, it can also be used to show residence in the U.S. And then finally, the last step would be to submit the W-7 along with your supporting documentation through one of the three acceptance methods, which we will discuss in just a little bit. Okay, so just to reiterate, for documentation, it's used to establish your identity and your connection to a foreign country. You must submit original documents or certified copies of the document. This might affect which way you choose to apply or to submit your application, which we will discuss in the next slide. And then finally, documentation must be current. So the IRS will not accept expired documentation, just something to be aware of. I have included a table that's included on the IRS website. This lists the different types of supporting documentation and the purposes that it can be used for. So you can see a passport can be used to verify your foreign status as well as your identity, compared to a U.S. driver's license, which would only verify your identity. So now that you have filled out the W-7 and you've gathered your supporting documentation, you need to submit it to the IRS. And there's three primary methods to do that. The first is by mailing it to the ITIN Operations Department. It's important to note this, you would only do this the first time. So if you don't have an ITIN number and you're applying for the ITIN, this is the only time that you would mail it to the ITIN Operations Department. Once you receive your ITIN, you would submit the IRS you would submit the tax return either electronically or if you're going to mail it in, you would have to mail it in to one of the acceptable to the address listed on the instructions. So either Louisville, Kentucky, Charlotte, North Carolina, or Cincinnati, Ohio. One of the drawbacks I think that it's important to note of applying by mail is the processing times. So especially if you're going to be submitting the originals of your supporting documentation, you should probably weigh how you're going to need those documents while your ITIN is being processed. It takes between 7 to 16 weeks, and that is a large amount of time to be without your support, passport or driver's license. Just something to be aware of. You could also apply for an ITIN in person using the services of an IRS authorized certifying acceptance agent. This will prevent you from having to mail your proof of identity and foreign status documents. The link that I've included here just has a list of IRS authorized certifying acceptance agents by state. I believe this link should take you directly to the ones in New York State, so it might be helpful. And then alternatively, you can also make an appointment at a designated IRS Taxpayer Assistance Center. This will also prevent you from having to mail your proof of identity and foreign status documents. And I think that's an important consideration. ITIN expiration. So there's really two ways that an ITIN can expire. The first is if it hasn't been included on a U.S. federal tax return at least once in the last 3 consecutive years. So for 2021, if you have not included your ITIN on a 2020, 2019, or 2018 tax return, it would be expired and you can't use it for 2021. Also, ITINs that were assigned before 2013 will expire according to an annual schedule, and that's really based on the middle digits of the ITIN. You can find that on the IRS website as well. Yeah. I also wanted to discuss what happens. So initially you applied, let's say you have your ITIN now, because you weren't eligible for a Social Security number, but circumstances change and now you're eligible to receive a Social Security number. You go to the Social Security Administration, apply, and you receive a Social Security number. So what do you do now? It's very important that you stop using the ITIN and you begin using your Social Security number instead. Again, just to reiterate, there are certain benefits that are only available to taxpayers using the Social Security number. So that's one reason. But it also, it's in order to be compliant with the tax laws, you should be using your Social Security number and not the ITIN once you have a valid Social Security number. It's important to note as well that it is your responsibility to notify the IRS that you have received your Social Security number, and this is really in order to combine all of your tax records under one identification number. If you fail to do this, you might lose some credits for wages paid and taxes withheld, and in essence, that would reduce the amount of your refund. And finally, I want to discuss more specifically ITIN and immigration. So I had mentioned that it is very important to be in filing compliance and collection compliance, even if you don't have lawful status in the U.S. So these are some tips actually directly from our immigration department, and I think that they are very helpful. So I did want to include them in our presentation today. As I mentioned, even if you don't have lawful status, it is very important to be in compliance with the tax laws. Failure to comply with the tax laws will create problems for you if you have the opportunity to apply for status down the line, a few years down the line. So although you're not thinking about it right now, just understand that if you fail to comply today with the tax laws, that can affect your ability to obtain lawful status in the future. And although it's easy to say, okay, so, well, I'm not eligible right now, why do I have to worry about this? Once I become eligible, I'll just, file my back due taxes. But it's important to understand that the more time that goes by, it becomes very difficult to file your taxes, or even impossible if you've lost documents. So it's much easier and better service for yourself to get the ITIN right now, and if you're eligible and if you do need it, to apply for an ITIN and file your taxes year by year rather than going back and filing them for 5 or 6, 7 years in the past. Also, make sure to get your advice and apply for your ITIN with the help of a qualified person. This is very, very important. And also on that same line of thinking, once you do get your ITIN, make sure to file your taxes with the help of a qualified person, like a VITA site or a tax counseling for the elderly site. This is really important because you don't want to use a person with no credentials or no background. Even if the tax preparer makes a mistake, you unfortunately would be on the hook. So it's really, really important that you do go to somebody who has credentials and who has background in tax preparation or in ITIN application preparation. The wrong advice is harmful, not just for tax purposes, but also for immigration reasons. So if if there are issues with your tax preparation, if there's fraud, this can put you at risk of losing your status if you're charged with a crime or advancing with status if you have an IRS map. So I can't stress enough how important it is that you go to a qualified tax preparer and a qualified agent to prepare your ITIN application. Does anyone have any questions? Just once again, this is our contact information. The 316 extension will get you directly to the to our LITD. Thank you so much. Have a great day.